introduce this.
2, 1. Oh God! Not the bees! Not the bees! Ah! Oh God, my eyes! Ah! 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 Hello,
All right,
everyone,
look, we rest in
and
peace, headphone
welcome
user.
to Tuesdays with Moire's second Halloween special, episode 53, not episode 52 like it says. Sorry about that. I couldn't log into my Twitch account for some reason, and I couldn't update that information in time, but this is episode 53, not the bees! I'm your host, Dean Taylor. Joining me tonight is my wonderful co-host and musician, Devin King, along with our co-host slash filmmaker, Stephen Beeson. Before we get started tonight, Stephen, I think you have some special announcements to make about your upcoming film projects.
Not really. No.
Oh,
No,
good.
I'm kidding.
Good segue.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, I think I had mentioned Hopeless Romantic will be streaming or be shown in theater in Austin, Texas for the Austin After Dark Film Festival. We are one of the finalists at that festival in the dark drama category. So hopefully, if nothing else, we will be there May 14th, I believe it is, picking up our finalist award, possible winner award. I don't know. I don't want to jinx it, but yeah, if you're in the Austin, Texas area, come out and see us. It's going to be a big fun time and lots of films and competition, stiff competition. Yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah, congratulations, buddy.
Thank you.
I can't
Thank
stress
you.
enough
my hands,
how difficult
motion
it is
around
to
my
get a
head.
film made, and a feature
Oh,
film, no
yeah.
less, must be incredibly satisfying to get through.
Well, and I mean the Austin Film Society. Come on, that's huge. That was
it's a film
actually,
society.
Yeah, that was founded, gosh, in the 1980s by Mr. Richard Linklater, who did Dazed and Confused, the Before trilogy,
School of Rock,
Boyhood,
all the classics.
Yeah, definitely some fun stuff.
Wow.
Blacker.
Is there any chance you could get us a Canada screening by any chance? Does Austin distribute to Canada, more specifically Ontario, London, Ontario?
Ontario.
I would have to see about that. I don't know. Maybe Toronto.
I'll go as far as
Let's
Toronto. There you go.
Yeah, Toronto Film Festival.
Yeah.
It should a TIFF. Maybe I think there's a Toronto midnight thing.
Hey,
happening.
there you go. Make it happen.
I'll send you the info. Or even better, Forest City Film Festival.
Yes.
Which
very nice.
It's happening now. It probably might be a bit late to enter into that, but that's London, Ontario's own film festival that happens every year.
Very nice.
Yeah,
A buddy of mine actually
got
got a music video that he made. So
Yeah.
congrats to Joel Parker.
Congratulations to everybody who got into these film festivals, and even movies like The Kid Detective or other big movies made in Canada are actually in the First City Film Festival. So I thought that was pretty cool. It just shows the kind of standards people like Steven, and I'm sorry, I already forgot your friend's name, but congratulations to him anyways. Must have been a lot of hard work to put that together, man. If you're listening,
Yes.
This is for you.
And I will say, how apropos that I'm the guest on this one, because my last name is Beeson. So
it was meant to be. Devin saw it was meant to be.
Yeah, it is actually spelled differently, and there's actually a funny story about that. The story that I was always told is that the Beesons came from England, and when they came to the Americas, the ones that went north spelled it B-E-E, and the ones that went south spelled it D-E-A. So I was almost a double E. Which is also funny because it probably means that somewhere down the line I may be related to like Luc Besson. I don't know. That's always just my theory.
So that's why you like him so much.
You could have been a double B gent.
I could have, yeah.
Man,
that joke doesn't work.
Well,
don't worry, we've got plenty of good B puns for tonight.
Devin, why don't you introduce this first one from
Yes.
1992?
The first film is one that I hadn't seen yet before, and boy, I'm glad that I did. We were talking about what's the guy's name? Bernard Rose's Candyman, based on a short story I believe written by Clive Barker. It's a horror film about the legend of Candyman, who is I believe he was a slave who fell in love with a white girl and was basically murdered by a bunch of jealous white guys by bees. Um, they stuffed bees in his mouth, and so this urban legend of him unfolds in the urban area, and this white woman played by fuck, what was the actress's name?
Virginia Madsen.
Virginia Madsen. She wants to go investigate this thing because it's a common legend, urban legend, that if you look into the mirror and say Candyman 5 times, that he will appear behind you and breathe down your neck and cut up all your insides with a hook.
Yes,
Nasty.
and also I think it's worth noting that Virginia Madsen is Michael Madsen's sister. So I thought that was kind of neat. We talked about Reservoir Dogs on the podcast once before,
Yes, we
and
did.
that is his sister. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I had no idea about that, and I guess I can kind of see the family resemblance, but I think she
Yeah.
got the better. I think she got the better genes.
And they're both
Well, I mean,
completely
yeah,
washed up now.
There's
Oh.
I'm sorry.
there's
Sure,
no going
she's a
wrong
nice
with
lady.
Levi's, but I will give Michael Madsen credit. He sticks to his Wranglers. Um.
Well,
Anyway, this film from the beginning was set up to impress me. I didn't know what to expect going in, other than scary horror movie with bees. But this voiceover of Tony Todd's character talking about, what is blood for other than shedding. I guess my answer would be sustaining life. But just his voiceover and this there's this mysticism about it that's just so powerful. And you have this aerial footage with music by Philip Glass, which was a real surprise for me. And Philip Glass really just classes this whole thing, like elevates it to a whole new level. If you don't know, Philip Glass is a composer. He's part of this minimalist classical movement where he works with a smaller orchestra. There's lots of motifs and repetition in his music that he builds upon. Actually, this film reminded me a lot of Koyaanisqatsi, at least in its opening and with its use of music, because that was Philip Glass's first cinematic music score. If you haven't seen Koyaanisqatsi, that's a film we'll have to talk about at some point. But yeah, that was just there was so much more class to this film than I would have anticipated going in, and it really felt like transcendental horror to me, which is not a phrase I like to throw around all that much. I feel like A24 has built their whole brand on creating transcendental horror, but this to me felt like an originator where there's more to it beyond the frame, beyond the screen, that it taps into. Like, despite this, cheese elements of this urban legend, I feel like there's deep roots in the storytelling that it's trying to tap into, and man, it really blew me away. I haven't felt this blown away by a horror movie since Possession.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
yeah,
I thought it was
I-
good.
Go
like
ahead.
it's I thought it was decent. It was the first time I was watching it too, and something you guys forgot to mention, Clive Barker is the executive producer and an uncredited writer for this movie.
Well,
I didn't
I said
actually
that
know that going
he
in.
wrote the original short story that it's based on,
Oh.
and it was
Sorry, I
Bernard
missed
Rose
that.
who approached him and said, "Can I adopt this?" And he says, "Yes, as long as I can be the executive producer."
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that. I'm still trying to
Yeah,
update the thumbnail. I'm sorry about that.
So, yeah, he wrote the original short story, The Forbidden, which was a part of the Books of Blood series. And Clive Barker also had a brief stint as a filmmaker himself. I don't think we've had the opportunity to talk really about him much, but he did Nightbreed, Hellraiser, I think was a big one, which they're already talking about doing a reimagining of the original Hellraiser novel from Hulu with
Ooh.
David S. Goyer attached. And he also did Lord of Illusions and a couple of other horror movies during the 80s and 90s. And this one he did not direct, but yes, he was an executive producer on. I just want to say I thought this film was great. I'm definitely closer to Devin's interpretation. Um, I thought it was fantastic, and I think that I would agree that it would be so easy to do this film in a way that felt cliche or contrived. And I admit that there are some elements that, in terms of age, maybe seem that way today. But I was very impressed by this film, and it shows a level of commitment and passion as far as horror filmmaking that I really don't see anymore. And it's just the commitment. It's the dedication. I think Tony Todd even agreed in his contract to do this film with live bees. So the bees that are inside of his mouth are real bees, and he was paid $1,000 for each sting. So he made, I think it was like $30,000 from this film just for being stung in the mouth. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was great. I thought there's some really, I think it kind of reminded me of like what Devin had talked about when we talked about Brawl in Cell Block 99. I think that you can go into this and just expect a sort of genre slash or what have you, and you can have a good time with it. But there's also these deeper layers and this sort of commentary that I think is maybe a little bit deeper, than people might expect.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I think. And what I love about it is I was just reading some of the filming locations. They filmed at the Cabrini Green Public Housing Project, which is a real place. And I love how they integrate the construction of that place into the plot. Like, so the legend of Candyman is that he was again the slave who fell in love with this rich white girl and was murdered for it, which is a real, world type of atrocity that could have very easily happened and has happened to people of that descent, and it's awful. But to take that and to create this legend around him, and how he says that what a gift it is to not have to be, but to live through as a rumor. Like, people say your name and they feel terror, and there's a power in this. And the fact that his ashes were spread over where this area would be, it's like he possesses and inhibits this building, this like cheap housing project, and urban development where there is no walls between the bathrooms. It's like the medicine cabinet. There's literally a hole between apartments, and the way they integrate the architecture of that real building into the story of this film, I thought is really cool. It kind of reminded me a bit of Man Bites Dog, how they comment on, how the housing projects and developments there, like taking this real world thing, but then creating a fictional plot around it and integrating into the filmmaking. It's I like that because it connects you to a place and time that was real that you may not have experienced, but it kind of brings that into the real world more.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
You guys are all right for sure. Agreed with everything you say so far. Tony Todd, absolutely carries this movie. His voice, I want his voice on a GPS system. It's the kind of voice that just gives you shivers every time you hear it. He could narrate a dictionary and it would still be really fascinating. And he genuinely made some of the scenes a lot creepier without sounding like he never sounds like he's trying too hard. Arguably at times, in my opinion, someone like Freddy Krueger or other horror movie villains like Chucky, he never feels like he stoops to that level to be creepy, but he still manages to achieve that nonetheless.
Freddy Krueger has nothing on this guy. Freddy Krueger should be shitting his pants next to this guy. I mean, fuck Freddy, he's a pedophile. This guy is genuine.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute. This guy is genuine. Wait a minute.
Yeah. Not even allegedly, but no,
okay. Well,
This
he
guy's
does.
just
All right. In fairness, he does lick a child's photograph in Freddy versus Jason, and I love how that there's like these little hints that still people are like, no, he just killed children. It's like, dude,
Come on,
much
wake
better.
up.
yeah.
But
no pun intended.
I do have some issues with it, and I think my biggest problem stems with the fact that it does feel like a compelling short story that was unfortunately just drawn out into a full movie. Like, I think the first 2 acts are really strong, and the last act is kind of awful. Like, laughably bad and
I thought the last act is
horrendous.
what made this thing transcendental.
Really?
The last act
That's
Oh,
is
interesting.
what elevated it to this metaphysical level that I wasn't expecting. Like everything else felt kind of grounded, but it's the fact that he's talking about fictional stories. It's kind of meta in a sense, fictional stories, and how just the telling of his story makes him greater. It gives him power. That now, if it weren't for people's saying his name and spreading his rumor, he would be nothing. He would cease to exist if everyone forgot about him. That is what made it for me.
I like that idea, but maybe I just preferred the grounded stuff more. Like, that was more unsettling and unnerving to me than the last act, where it kind of felt like an experimental film gone bad. Like, the whole, like, he's got the new wife, and the new wife is yelling for no reason and slapping meat around the room. Like, none of you guys thought that was unintentionally funny? Like, that was ridiculous. Like, nobody acts this way.
Well, I don't know. It didn't stick out to me. Like, I noticed it, but, like, that wasn't what I was focusing on. It was the fact that he possesses people to commit murders in his name without them realizing. It's like he possesses people, and then, because, like, she ultimately, physically, as far as we know, is the one that killed, like, these people. Like, she cuts off this dog's head, and the fact that she gets blamed for it only because she's possessed by his, like, being, just for believing in him. Man, that's this is almost like possession and possessor mixed into one movie.
Yeah, that I've mentioned with Possessor before. Sorry, Possession. No, it's Possessor. They have very similar names. That this kind of horror, right. Like the loss of control, absolutely terrifies me. Like, it's just a concept that really shakes me to my core.
And,
just suddenly losing
like,
control.
Is this all in her head, or is it this other entity, or is it just the fact that she's heard of this entity, that she creates it, and it becomes real in her mind? That's the interesting thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it's really neat how that they incorporate this psychological horror. Like, I mean, the idea of imagining that you wake up in a place you're not familiar with and there's a dead dog, and it's like it puts you into that character's shoes, and it does it in such a way that is extremely effective. And I feel like there are so many horror movies today that try to do that kind of psychological horror, that try to put you into those shoes, and I feel like this does it so much better.
I
feel
like the remake.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll get into that in a little bit, but yeah.
But I love the use of practical lighting. It reminded me of, like, the Italian giallo films. This film is incredibly neurotic. No, I mean,
that's part of its time. A lot of early 90s and late 80s films were very, very horny.
Well, I mean, yeah, and Hellraiser is the same way, definitely.
Yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street to an extent, with all, like, Freddy Krueger's, like,
with
insinuations.
We keep coming back to this, yeah.
Yeah, it all just comes back to Krueger one way or another. But we're talking about horror films around, like, the 90s and 80s.
Yeah,
like, Freddy Krueger's gonna come up at some point.
Friday the 13th, it's like he's only murdering
horny teenagers,
kids that are having sex.
I wanted to mention that, like, one thing I like about this movie, and one thing I really hate about most slasher movies, and why Black Christmas was kind of disappointing for me, was that, like, all the characters that die kind of deserve it in a way, and that just makes it a lot less interesting. There's no tension. It's like, okay, this is an unlikable, one-dimensional asshole that's inevitably gonna get murdered for that, poetic justice vibe, but I'm not really feeling anything from it. I'm not feeling anything from these characters. Why should I care? But in this,
which
lot
Black
of
Christmas, though?
The original. I didn't care for a single character in that movie personally, but here, like, there was a lot of like nice, genuine characters or just innocent characters that die, and that makes it so much more impactful. It's like, wow, if you have actual characters or actual normal people die instead of unlikable one-dimensional characters, guess what? I'm more invested in your story. And it really kind of cements home the message about the movie, like the power that this character has. And I kind of saw the message as an influence of like how treating races in a certain way can affect them in the future in negative ways. Like how the way we treat others just affects them negatively in the future, and how it has like uncontrollable outcomes that you can't stop. That whole vibe to the horror is what made the film work for me. And the last act does, in my opinion, kind of ditch that, which is probably why I lost interest.
Well, I think I mean,
and it kind of becomes more of a generic horror movie with some weird twists at the end.
I think you're talking about the sort of last bit where the guy says Helen into the mirror 5 times. But, I mean, if you're talking about the third act as a whole, that entire sequence with her crawling through that trash fire, I mean, that was horrific. To me, I thought
that was fantastic.
That was great. Yeah, like, it was great imagery wise, and it was great like on paper. But I don't know. I didn't really feel anything from it. Like
I think the last act of this is better than the last act of New Nightmare. I think this film,
I agree with that,
delivers in the ways that film, that film sold me on the meta aspect, and it's great. But that to me felt like a generic ending to a horror movie, where this, I think, elevates it to another level, where Helen kind of becomes the thing she was not exactly out to destroy, but one she got a little too curious about to look into, and she becomes the new kind of figure. I mean, it's seen as a little cheesy, but I think the film delivers on more than it promised, which I was surprised and delighted by.
I don't know. Yeah. I'll agree that I guess it's just I liked what the first 2 acts were going for, that I just wanted more of that. Maybe I just went in with wrong expectations. Like, maybe if I just watched the film again, I'd feel differently. Because I feel like a lot of films like this, my opinions changed drastically. Like, The Shining is a good example where I couldn't care less about the film the first time I watched it, but going in again, knowing what to expect from the tone and the pacing, I loved it so much more. So I'm kind of wondering if this would be the same response for the original Candyman.
I think maybe so. I think did you watch the 2021 sequel before this?
After. I watched it after.
Okay.
I wouldn't have watched the sequel unless I saw the first one.
Well, that's what I was making sure.
That's
because the
first film
would
is
definitely,
yeah,
would definitely color your experience.
I'm glad that I saw the original before seeing the new one.
Yeah, the new one made me appreciate the original a lot more.
My first thought was, I don't know how they can improve upon this other than just superficial aesthetic things, but like I think that they would miss the plot of what to me made it special, and I'm still working on articulating what that is. Maybe I have some personal bias. What's funny is some years ago, in a random box at a flea market, I found a bunch of like signed scripts, and one of them was Candyman, and I didn't see the movie. I just thought, oh, I recognize that name. So I don't know, maybe it felt like that was it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like I found this thing, I discovered it, and I actually loved the movie.
Yeah,
I imagine someone just printed off the screenplay and went to a convention where all the cast happened to be there and got them to sign it. My guess.
Would be pretty cool. I'd get Tony Todd to like sign like all my horror movies. Like, I genuinely want to meet this guy. Like, he joins the pantheon of great voices along with Morgan Freeman, James Earl Jones, and David Attenborough. Like, his voice is up there. I don't know how I ran into this guy so late. Like, wow, whenever you find like a cool new voice actor, it's just you want to see more of their work because they just do such a compelling job. And he basically is a voice actor for most of the movie, but when he does show up, it is definitely effective. Even if I think like the crawling out of the fire scene was a little bit, it kind of felt a little bit like we're trying too hard to make it scary. Again, like, this could change on a second viewing. Maybe I'm wrong, but it has been a week since I've seen it because I didn't want to pay money to rent it again.
Yeah. I I thought this was fantastic. I really did, and I agree with Devin. I know that uh, the original Candyman came out in '92,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe in 1995, and again in 1999, they made a Candyman one, or they made a Candyman 2 and 3,
Oh
uh,
yeah, I remember seeing that at
which
the store.
the if I remember correctly, Tony Todd was the only person to return, and they were uh, not as warmly received as the first.
No,
The
and that's the thing with sequels is that they kind of just up the game in a superficial level. Like aesthetically, they might improve things and they might come up with more creative like kills, but it's not developing the core subject matter or the core heart of the story. Like to me,
well,
it's this idea of the urban legends and how people keep stories alive through word of mouth. That
sure,
was
and I
really
mean,
the
I
core driving force of the thing.
yeah, and I was talking about this in the Discord earlier. It's like with the new Halloween Kills that just came out. It's like the timeline that, like, the first one came out in '78. And so there's at least 10 different movies that are all somehow loosely connected to their own, timeline. And it's like, I think at some point, yeah, the original tends to be the best.
Well, the risk
Um,
with sequels is that unless you're really passionate about making them, the people who make the sequels in the future just have a habit of forgetting what made the original special, or they try something new and put their own vision on it, cough the Last Jedi, and it just kind of ends up being a bit of a mess that betrays what the original is going for, and then they have to change the timeline again just to make people happy. Like, the more movies you
yeah,
make in a franchise, the bigger the risk that gets. Like, it's a miracle that franchises like Harry Potter are like as consistently, I'd argue consistently decent considering how many films are in the main franchise, not including Fantastic Beasts. Like, that must be a huge task to try and keep like a consistent vision and a consistent arc for all of the characters. Like, it must have
sure.
been a
And
nightmare to manage that.
that goes back to what we were talking about last week with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the first one is always going to be the best, and I think that was due to this sort of psychological meta commentary that we were talking about. The sequels weren't able to capture that. The sequels were more in your face and more gory and
Yeah,
more
something like the Saw
Yeah, it's
sequels.
it's like they always enhance the superficial elements. Like, oh, let's
right.
have more
Let's up the
body parts
ante.
and more flesh and make it more fucked up. Like it's just aesthetically dressing it, but it's not getting to the core drive of the story.
Right. And see, the thing is, I mean, even though I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, Candyman 3 from, 1999 or the earlier second one, like, I'm not going to pretend that those are masterpieces. The reviews are pretty bad, and I can understand why. But at the same time, I would be interested in seeking them out solely because of Tony Todd. I think
Mm.
his
Yeah.
performance alone would make me consider watching these kind of direct to
Yeah.
DVD
I kind of agree with
trashy
you. He kind of made me want to watch the
sequels.
remake, so.
Yeah,
I was talking to my buddy Bernard, who I know has been I know has seen this movie, and he said the sequels got pretty absurd, but he still enjoyed them for what they are, and I imagine that's probably at least in part due to Tony Todd's performance. Like, how do you carry yourself gracefully through a project that's probably not totally warranted? You have to kind of believe in it, which I think ties into his character, just the power of belief. That's what drives the the movie forward. So I think he literally embodies that element of the story.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Tony Todd has also been in some other horror films, such as The Crow and the Final
Mm-hmm.
Destination films.
Oh,
Oh
I
And
forgot
damn!
he was in that.
he's often the best part of those films. I mean, he is a extremely talented actor, and man, he is top of his game here.
Oh yeah.
Virginia Madsen, I was impressed with her performance.
Yeah, she was great. For sure.
Yeah,
she definitely sells the lack of control aspect well for the most part. There were some scenes where it felt like she was a little over the top, but I could put that to the time period and the fact that this kind of horror was new at the time, so maybe they just didn't quite know how to get to that level.
Well, I mean, there's horror today that's pretty over the top. I mean, look at Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary.
I would say that was
I thought that was fantastic. Her performance.
Oh, it is a fantastic.
I would say it's over the top in a way that makes sense, in a way that's
it's
grounded
very
in the
hysteric.
situation.
It's and so I think that kind of goes along with horror movies and the sort of portrayal of psychosis.
It's really hard. Balance.
It's a portrayal of people at extreme emotion states. Like that's the point of horror, is to show people in extreme duress.
Yeah.
And you kind of look at and you try to watch and you kind of imagine yourself in these scenarios. Like, how would I react and how could I learn from seeing someone else? And like, I think that's part of the thing of horror, is people almost virtually trying to put themselves in high stress situations with a safety net, just trying to make sure that they don't play it dumb, right? And that's why I think people get frustrated with dumb characters in horror movies. Like, the guy's clearly around the corner, he's gonna hit you over the head with a fucking hammer in 2 seconds. Like,
definitely.
And you don't always have that foresight if you're in a dangerous or stressful situation. So you try to. I think people that watch horror films try to learn how to not die in those kind of situations.
Right. But I thought the suspense in this film, just Hitchcock suspense.
Like, the first kill is like easily my favorite scene in the movie. Like, it was just like a perfect build up, and none of it was scary, but a lot of it was like, ew. Like, God,
the way
like, that's just like the bees sticking out the tongue. Like, I actually felt physically repulsed at that scene. It's like, that's repugnant, but in all the right ways. Like, not in a way that's over the top.
It's the money shot.
Exactly.
That's the money shot of the whole
Quite
movie.
literally the money shot.
The honey shot. Oh, shit, I completely missed that one. That's so fucking good.
That's the honey shot.
The honey shot.
We have the best bee pun. Everybody, good night.
I was just reading, though, that the bees were specifically bred for this film. Their entire purpose in life was to be in Tony Todd's mouth. And they had to be no younger or no older than 12 weeks old, because that's old enough that they look mature, but their stingers aren't strong or fully put into place yet that they'll do any real damage. So even though he got stung by bees with inadequate stingers. So,
okay, that was it's not like you're gonna notice when there's like 50 bees coming out of his tongue. Like, you're not gonna look at each and every bee and go like, no, that's not an adult. You can see like the stinger isn't fully grown yet. Like, it's always never really noticeable.
No, like you're not gonna notice it, and it's still just as effective even knowing that. Just the fact that he has bees in his mouth. Period.
Yeah, that's still dangerous.
You
could just swallow him at any moment. Like, imagine
and he got stung regardless, but he didn't get stung by super venomous stingers.
Yeah,
great, because it means he can be alive to do more movies.
I wonder what his tongue looks like now, though. It's got to be pretty swollen.
Oh yeah.
Well, what would you guys give Candyman out of 10? Guess I kind of want to talk about the remake with Steven.
Devin, do you want to go first?
This film, again, took me by surprise. I really liked it. It felt like a fulfilling moment for me. I really enjoyed this film. I give it a solid 8.
Nice. What about you, Steven?
Well, I agree with Devin. I think it's a great film, but I'm going to be slightly more generous, because I think this is really just a horror masterpiece, and I'm going to give it a 9.5.
Nice.
You know what, fuck it. I'm going to give it a 9.6, just to stick that.
I'll give it a 10. How about that? I'll give it a 10.
Hey!
I'll give it 11.
Okay.
That's Devin, everybody. So, I didn't like it as much as you guys, but I still enjoyed it a lot nonetheless. It didn't quite stick the landing, but it crashed with a flourish, so I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. I'll definitely watch it again. Maybe I'll improve on a second watch.
So we have 2 10s and a 7?
No, we have a 9.6 and a 7. Thank you.
Did you change to a 10, Devin?
I'm making it a 9.6.
Okay, I'm
Okay,
gonna
he
go with
can't
10
pander
then.
too much.
All right, I'm
All right.
sticking to my 10.
All right. So, Steven, how about a quick discussion on the Candyman remake?
Well, quick.
Remake, sequel, spiritual successor.
Yep.
Yeah, it's terrible. No, um,
Good
it
start.
all of the magic of the original is lost. There's no Tony Todd except for briefly he makes a somewhat bizarre, almost Rogue One CGI kind of appearance in
That's
a
exactly
bizarre
what
way.
it is. Spoiler alert, by the way.
Spoiler. Yeah, it's wow. It is not great. Yeah, the new Candyman actually follows the story of the young baby who Virginia Madsen saves at the bonfire sequence, and yeah, I mean, I watched it. I was glad that I saw the original. That I knew, what I was going into. But it definitely made me appreciate the original that much more because I think one thing, and we didn't even talk about this with uh, the original is a very political film. It definitely has a message, and it definitely has an intent to its story. It's very socially aware, but it's not done in such a way that is too direct. It doesn't beat you over the head in a sense. It kind of says its point and then it's done. Whereas the new Candyman, the 2021 film, lacks all of the subtlety and nuance. It doesn't commit to any of the world building. Like,
Nope.
there's people who say Candyman 5 times and Candyman shows up and then they do it again in another scene and he doesn't show up.
He
It is a
shows up whenever the
mess.
plot needs him to. I wouldn't
Yeah,
say the original was like the most subtle film. However, it is considerably more subtle than this film. You know how in the first Jurassic Park, when they explored like the themes in that movie, it wasn't the most subtle thing in the world, but it was subtle enough. Like it felt organic
sure.
to the characters and the story at the very least. But
It's
this
tastefully employed.
exactly. But this movie feels more like a Jurassic World, where every time they have a message, it's like, here's why the bad guy's plot is bad. Here's why this character is playing God. Here's why it's not okay to do scientific things.
It's
Every
like
time they say a message in the remake, they are just standing around talking down to the audience like they're a bunch of 2-year-olds at a political recital. This writing reminds me of Birdemic. I'm not even slightly joking about that. That's on that level
No,
of let's just
I,
explain the message to the audience. And I heard like the
I,
excuse of some people saying that, oh, what the message is important, so you don't need to be subtle about it. Like that is no excuse. That is no excuse for bad writing and just shoving messages down the
well,
audience's throat. That's not
the other
okay.
thing is with the original, there's an entire sequence in the beginning that takes place at college class, and they kind of explain to you what they're going for. And then it's like the entire rest of the movie is just the movie. Like you get what they're going for. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a little bit direct, but this film, the new film, it is like every scene is that college class.
It's like attaching a sledgehammer to a jackhammer and letting it run for 2 hours. That's the
It
equivalent of
is
watching this movie.
well, yeah, and I mean the other thing that I disliked is and I mean I don't know. This sounds in bad taste to say this, but I am going to go ahead and say it. Virginia Madsen, um, she's very likable in the original movie. I mean, in the sense that you understand where she's coming from and you believe in her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it does things with her character that show that she's not a part of this sort of urban uh, world, but she genuinely cares about the people and she's doing her best, I think, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at first, at least, right? Um, the new film like every single white person is the worst, like tropey, like racist trailer park guy.
Unlikable asshole. Yeah,
Yeah,
and here's what I
Here's the
mentioned.
interesting
Yeah.
thing. So I don't know any of the new characters, obviously, but I will say about Vanessa Madsen's character, it's weird that at first I didn't care about her all that much, but she grows through the film,
Mm-hmm.
and that to me is what made her character enduring and likable. Like she was almost she's this like preppy university person who's doing a thesis, and I understand the whole academia thing. I've been to those kind of circles. She was almost like a little too put together, and going into a place that she knows nothing about to investigate, and so there's a little bit of ignorance on her thing, but through that horrific experience, like her character kind of breaks down, and that's when it became more relatable to me. So there's a gradient to her character. There's an arc
yeah.
there.
That's
Um,
it. There's character depth,
Yeah,
and
there's
there's
depth to her character. Like you don't
There's a
really agree with what she's doing, but you understand why she's doing it. But they just completely take that away in the sequel. Like it's kind
I
of like
mean,
you said, and
it's
something I mentioned earlier that in the first movie, people who died were like mostly innocent people. Here, every single person who dies deserves it one way or another. It's like, oh, that guy was an
mm,
asshole. I don't feel bad for them. Oh, those kids were idiots. I don't feel bad for them
and
either.
and it's like
well,
I get from the screenwriter perspective, maybe you want to write the characters to a point where they feel like okay, they need to go now. But watching the film, it's if I become detached to a character and I see them go, I feel nothing. And
Exactly.
then and there's no lingering after effect of them going. Like I feel like I still feel awful that Bernadette died in the original, and that Vanessa is the one that killed her because Candyman like took over her body or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's because she
yeah,
didn't deserve it, right? And it's that feeling of injustice that drives the emotion of me as a
and
viewer.
drives the horror.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Whereas,
here every single character just deserves it one way or another, and I just end up
well, and the
feeling
other thing
nothing, and
is,
it
I
destroys the
mean,
message too.
I don't know
it
that
becomes
the
a nihilistic thing.
protagonists. I
Exactly.
don't know that the protagonists are even that likable. Um,
They're just kind of
yeah,
there. Like they have no
they're just
depth to
kind of
them
there. Yeah,
whatsoever. They're
and
just there to have the plot dumped onto them.
it also pissed me off because the art owner, uh, spoilers, one of the first deaths of the film is a guy named Clive, which I just felt was a little bit disrespectful in a shady sort of way because
Yeah.
of Clive Barker writing the original story.
You think
Unless
that was
Clive
deliberate?
Barker. I thought it was a joke. I thought it was just like, isn't it funny that that guy was named Clive? Like, maybe
Oh
Clive Barker was in
well,
on it. Yeah, it's like, wouldn't it be kind of funny if you killed the character named Clive? As like a reference to me.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It just sort of rubbed me the wrong way,
I don't
and
know.
I mean, yeah, it's not even just the victims of the deaths. It's just that everyone is so unlikable.
Yeah, I know. Like, there's no depth to it whatsoever. It's just, it feels very tropey. It feels very cliche when the original, at least for the most part, felt pretty organic and original. But here it just feels like it's kind of like, oh, this is a popular icon. We can kind of shove our messages into the movie and just get it out there. Like, this film very much has like a shove it out there feel. Like, for example, like there's some like great cinematography in this movie and some really nice lighting, but my problem is like it doesn't add anything. I'm not really feeling anything from the cinematography. It kind of feels like that one drone shot video online about like going through the bowling alley. Like it's cool, it's impressive, but what does it mean? Like it's not adding anything to the horror or the tension or the
Well, and I
characters.
mean that was
It's just
even
like it's a cinematographer showing off.
yeah. I
Well,
mean the
No substance.
cinematography, like the visuals, were about the only thing that this film had going for
I'd
it.
say some
But
of the performances were pretty good, even though they didn't have anything to work with, but they at least tried. Like I thought the main actor was pretty good for the most part, but they
he
just had
was he
nothing
had
to work with.
yeah, kind of a lackluster plot and impressive visuals, but
Great music too. Like it's not on
yeah, there
par
was
with
some
the
good
original
music.
score, but there was some great music too. But that's the thing.
Yeah,
Like it's all this style just trying to smother over this lack of substance. Like it's very
yeah,
clearly a style over substance. And one part of the style I didn't like is the original they used real bees. In this movie, it's CGI. Every single bee
Yeah,
is
and
CGI.
that kind of goes into
Not
just
the
the
CGI
level.
bees.
Yep, Wicker Man bees.
Uh,
But at the same time, here's my argument. There's no way you could get away with the bees in the original movie. In this era of lawsuit culture and like expensive actors and producers like freaking out every time like Tom Cruise hyperextends like his shin bone or something, what else were they gonna do? Like, I'm sorry, there's no way you could get away with real bees in this generation unless they were, they pulled the Raiders of the Lost Ark and kept them hidden behind glass. Like,
Something
it's
that I would
terrible,
say,
but I'm not surprised, unfortunately.
again,
yeah.
disclaimer, I haven't seen the remake, but in terms of lighting, something I appreciate in the original was there were times where they highlighted just Vanessa's eyes, like they would just have this
Mm-hmm.
soft like slit of light over her eyes, and whenever she was entering into like a dream state or in communication with Candyman, there was even one scene in the when she was first hearing about his story in detail, um, that soft lighting was focused on her eyes, and I thought that really elevated those scenes and entered into that transcendental realm. I think it was first at that dinner scene where
Yeah.
like you see that lighting, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
motif that they use, and I like that they use just a very simple like lighting trick to elevate the scene and to make it feel special.
Did
Yeah,
you
So
and
did
they
you mean
added. Sorry, go on.
did you mean Virginia? You've been
yeah,
saying Vanessa.
well, isn't that her character name, or am I confusing that?
No, Virginia Madsen plays Helen.
Helen. Where am I getting Vanessa from? I
Austin
don't know. We're
Powers?
getting.
I don't know.
The Vanessa Estelle Williams plays the part of Anne Marie. So I don't know. Maybe you got your
Fair enough.
actresses mixed up. I don't know.
Probably.
Um,
The main actress in Candyman, they had soft lighting on her eyes to
Mm-hmm.
show that
yes.
she was in this dream state or
Yeah,
entering into this realm of the fiction.
yeah, and that had a
Well,
purpose behind it, right? But all of the
Exactly.
camera
Like
work
it's
here is very pretty, but it's just glossed over. It feels like a clever film student was just brought on the set and was just told to try to make the film as visually interesting as possible. And sure, it looks
I feel like
nice, but
cinematography these days have become more of a technical exercise where they're going for like these perfectly shaped histograms so that the colorist can really fine tune the image, and that's all great. But like I was saying with like Texas Chainsaw, sometimes if you just have the eyepiece with a basic frame guide or maybe nothing in it at all,
mhm,
then you're really honing in and focusing on what you're actually seeing in the image.
that's true.
And some elements might fall to the wayside, but it feels like there's an organic framing there where sometimes if you're looking through a digital monitor, some of that information, which is usually pretty crucial, can still be distracting from what you're actually creating in the image.
Yeah, and I contrast this with something like The Lighthouse, where it's like every shot and every lighting choice just builds on the narrative and the tension and
Mm.
the horror. And that was made with $5 million and was shot in Nova Scotia with admittedly old and crappy film equipment, yet it has so
Well,
much more to say with
yeah,
its visual
and
language.
this is the thing. Like cinematography is a balance of technical and artistic
Hmm.
intentions brought together. In that case, they resurrected an old film format with these really vintage lenses, really low speed, so they really had to light the thing like, with these crazy bright lamps. But all those technical things were in service of setting a time and place for the story and being in place with these characters. So you have to balance those two.
Something else I wanted to bring up before we close off on the remake. The weird choice they have to try to make Candyman, spoiler alert, an anti-hero by the end of the movie?
Well,
What was that all about?
I mean, we're kind of spoiling it here, but
I'm sorry, I can't help it.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
so stupid.
if
You
if
kind of
Devin
spoiled that it
does
shows up at
try
the
to,
end, so
yeah, if Devin does try to watch this, which I would recommend that he not, because I think I don't know, maybe
we're
at the
trying to
very
help you.
least it would even make your first impression of the original that much better. But they do have a weird uh, ending note that they almost try to turn the Candyman figure into this vigilante,
This misunderstood
Punisher,
hero.
superhero type character, and it really, yeah, it did
It
not
feels
work
like
for
it
me.
misses the point because what I found so compelling about Candyman is you understand why he is what he is and why it makes sense to him, but he is just clearly in the wrong and being vengeful and killing people. But you can understand he came from slavery and well, actually no, it was like the facts. This is an element I forgot. He was an educated black person as well in his time, and so he had kind of a foot in the door into higher society, so to say. But and that's why I think he kind of, I mean, he almost kills indiscriminately black people or white people. It seems like he just chooses his victims, whoever chooses to believe him, really. But like, there's a line where he is clearly in the wrong, but there's all this backstory that informs it that you understand, and that's what makes for a compelling villain. Where making an anti-hero that kind of clouds it morally a little bit, and sometimes there's something good in some moral ambiguity, but
Yeah,
sometimes you're getting your wires crossed if you do
it's the
that.
issue with 2010. What they did with Hal it's like they tried to make him this sympathetic hero by the end of the movie, but we already felt bad for this character in the last movie. Why are you trying to beat us over the head about it even more? This was something that was already established.
Yeah, I mean, I
Well,
don't know. I feel like this speaks to people in black communities, and I can't speak on that. Um, but I know this is an important film for some people just because he's someone who represents that. Um, so yeah, I'm not going to comment too much on that because again, I can't speak to it. But I do think that he is still a compelling character regardless, and it's important to kind of be true to what he originally stood for. I think because there's enough compelling elements to that.
well, speaking of compelling characters, let's talk about Nicolas
Well,
Cage.
first, what would
Okay.
you give the Candyman remake out of 10?
4 out of 10. I did not like it at all. Uh,
I'll give it a
yeah.
little higher. I'll give it 4.5 out of 10. Can't really give it much higher than that. I want to like it more than I did. I really wanted to give this film a chance after enjoying the original so much, but
Sure.
I couldn't. It's such a mess.
Well, speaking of messes, in 2006, writer director Neil LeBoot,
Great name.
yeah, great name. The also the writer and director of Possession from 2002, not Possessor
Oh,
and not the other
not the
Possession.
80s good Possession.
No, this was a 2002 romantic mystery starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Aaron Eckhart. But yeah, that guy directed a remake of the 1973 British film The Wicker Man,
Oh
while
yeah.
also drawing from the source material of David Pinner's 1967 novel Ritual. The film stars Nicolas Cage as police officer Edward Malice, who's
What a name, first of all.
yes, what a name.
Very
Malice.
subtle.
He gets a letter in the mail from a woman he knew, I'm guessing 10 to 20 years ago, who was his ex-fiance, and informs him that her daughter, who, spoiler alert, you later find out is their daughter, has gone missing.
But
And
first,
she needs
what happened to Nicolas Cage's daughter?
Yeah. Well,
I
so
shouldn't laugh, but the way it's handled, oh man.
so yes. So they've this daughter has disappeared, and she's asked for her help on the island of Summer Isle. He suspects something sinister because there is a cult of neo-pagan women all on this island. Boy, this film is terrible.
Oh man.
No, it's I mean, it's at least better than Midsommar. I mean,
Ah.
right. So he gets to the island. Um, which all right. So let's talk about this. The moment that he gets the letter, he immediately goes to the police station that he works at, and he shows this letter to a buddy of his. And his buddy literally gives him every reason not to go.
Yeah.
And you, as the audience, are like, yeah, no, he's right.
Don't go.
Don't go. You don't know that this is even her. You haven't spoken to her in like 10 years.
You don't even like this person.
Yeah, you don't even like
She's
this
your
person.
ex.
You find out later that she didn't even return the ring.
What?
This is the worst plot to get somebody to come to a death island.
And this is weird. This is weird because in the original, the way it opens up, it just opens up with him arriving to the island. And in the original, his name is Sergeant Howie, so they completely changed his character. He has no personal connection to the island at all. He's just there to investigate a missing girl. So it starts off in kind of that neutral territory where it's not with the remake. I guess they try to make his angle more personal, which kind of makes it more problematic. There's that word again. Or again, giving him all these reasons not to go. Like, I guess it makes it personal, but
they tried to add to the stakes, but doing so only took away from the movie. And I gotta specify real quick, I have not seen the original movie. This is the only version of the Wicker Man I've seen.
I only watched the original because one, I felt remiss that I hadn't seen it yet, but two, I couldn't find the remake on Netflix or Prime. I know I have a rip-off DVD of it somewhere around, but I couldn't be bothered to dig it out. I just watched the original and figured it would remind me enough of the remake, but there's quite a lot of differences in it. Some are just as absurd. Like, it's very like heavy with colonialism themes in a sense and Christian-centric kind of views, and it's like this fear of just hippie paganism.
Mm-hmm.
There's even some weird musical sequences in it. But it's actually really compelling. Like, it actually gets to a pretty, and also Christopher Lee is in it. A very young Christopher Lee who apparently played in it for free. So I recommend the original.
I'll definitely check it out.
I had to watch a compilation of the remake just to remind me, and there's some laughs.
Yeah, let's talk about the first thing they do when he gets on the island.
We should also talk about there is a sequence in this film that really does not tie into the rest of the plot at all. They try to insist that it does, but it doesn't. Nicolas Cage is driving on the road on his police motorcycle, and there is a doll that is dropped out of this moving car. And the editing in that sequence is horrendously bad because she throws the doll out, and then he picks up the doll, and then instead of just moving to the next set, it immediately cuts back to where the doll was almost before he had driven off. It is horrendous. And there's this... So he gets to the car, he gives the doll back, and then a giant truck comes out of nowhere and it hits this car head on. It bursts into flames. He doesn't call for backup.
Nope.
He just tries to get into this burning, crashed vehicle on its own. And then throughout the rest of the movie, he sees these visions of this little girl getting hit by a car, which, again, none of this has anything to do with the plot. If they had at least shown, maybe there was, maybe he was having a dream sequence of imagining this girl burning because she was in a burning car. That would at least foreshadow his death at the end of the film, but it doesn't. And it keeps trying.
Yeah, there's no way there isn't a director's cut of this film.
It intentionally or unintentionally kind of encapsulates the whole experience of the film, where they're clearly trying to parallel or create this foreshadowing motif of, this girl kind of being trapped in a car, and eventually he gets trapped in the Wicker Man and burns alive. but it completely dismantles by a fucking truck coming out of nowhere and destroying the whole thing. I think that's this whole film in a nutshell, with what it was trying to do.
Yeah,
So
it feels like
I
it's
think in a way it encapsulates the whole experience of the film unintentionally.
So he gets to the island, and the first thing that happens is there's a group of women carrying
cackling
bloodied,
and laughing.
they're carrying a bloody sack, which most definitely has a body in it. And he's like, "I'm with the police force.
What's
you know,
that?
I need
Is
to
it a
see
shark
what's in
or
the
something?"
body, what's in the bag." And,
You won't get to see. And it's never
Yeah,
addressed
and
again. That's it.
and then,
That's all you
yeah,
get.
and they just start laughing, and he's like, "Come on, what's in there? A shark?" It's like,
Yeah, of course it's a
Yeah.
shark. And that human-sized bag. Of course.
and so they don't open the bag. He
Nope.
clearly sees that there's blood dripping from the bag.
Nothing to see here. Moving on.
And they
That's
just
most of the
move on,
movie.
like, he
It's just characters
walks
being
away.
stupid. This suffers the writing trope of movies that, to avoid giving too much exposition, every character talks like an Oblivion NPC where you don't have a high enough speech skill, and they just completely change the subject constantly or ignore simple questions. Even if it's just going like, "How's your day going?" They'll say some random bullshit, and that's clearly because the writers didn't want to give away too much information, but they weren't smart enough to hide the information in a clever way. So they're like, "We'll just have our characters talk about random bullshit for an hour and a half, and then explain the plot by the end of it," because that's a satisfying payoff.
Man, it is. Yeah, I mean, these characters, the dialogue is so cringe.
Yeah. Oh man, I have to admit, up until the last 30 minutes, I was kind of bored with this movie. A lot of it's just boring and frustrating until the
I
last 30
agree.
minutes. Because the last 30
30
minutes, I just want to say real quick, this feels like a showgirl situation where it's like, this is terrible. So you know what we should do? Let's just pretend to be bad on purpose and be as over the top as possible so people will think we were a bad movie. Because there's no excuse for this. There's no way the director looked at the scene of Nicolas Cage roadhouse kicking a woman into a bunch of pictures and thought, yes, this fits. This fits in my
Well,
creepy
I
horror
mean,
movie. There's
I-
no way he thought that. There must
Really,
have been
what
in
I
on the
love
joke.
when he punches the woman in the face in a bear
And it's
Oh,
no, he
that
doesn't
scene.
punch the bear. It gives a long shot of him running up, giving this build up. It looks so stupid. Again, how they look at that and go this fits. This doesn't look dumb at all. And he
He
nods to
punches
each
a
other.
woman-
They nod to each other like it's the Naked Gun.
Well, and it's also, I want to talk about the fact that this film, you finally get to the end, and there's the last 30 minutes. He's disguised in a bear costume.
Which
Yep.
wait, I can't remember. Did they show where he got the bear costume in the first place?
Yeah, that was the craziest thing, is that there was the woman who owned the bar, the owner of the tavern, she randomly had a bear costume. I guess
Oh,
she
is
was
that
gonna
where they
wear
had it? I completely missed that because I had to run to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, well, you didn't miss.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but-
just again, it's just plot convenience. Oh, there's just a bear suit here. Oh, there's just a doll here in the middle of fucking nowhere, so we can have Nicolas Cage scream about it for 2 minutes. This
Well,
movie would be nothing without Nicolas Cage. Ironically and unironically, nobody would pay any interest to this movie if it wasn't for Nicolas Cage's insanity. So I will give him credit for that.
Yeah, and I just wow. Everything about this film, pretty much on a narrative level, on just the rules of storytelling, emotional beats. God, this film is terrible.
Oh man, so many cliches too.
And
Beautiful
the
in
thing
that
about it
way.
is, it's barely so bad it's good. It really becomes that in the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, the
whereas
first
I
two are
think-
just frustrating and
Where-
boring.
It's weird because the original is kind of almost cut dry, bear like police TV drama in structure until the last 30 minutes as well. That's where things really rev up, and it's this horror, and it really does it effectively. Where like the horror of what they're getting at is this whole town turning on you and turning you into the sacrifice, and that was one of the first films to really have horror in broad daylight, because horror usually happens at night under the cover of night, and there's usually that kind of safety net there. Where this is like the whole town, they've brought you to this island and you've become the fool that we're going to sacrifice, and it becomes this like religious thing, and there's so much iconography in that really does tie into like the paganism, even though you could read it as this irrational fear of like paganism and the hippie movement for its time. Like it's very much a film of its time, but at least it's very effective in what it was going for. And especially with this very Christian-centered view, because this one person comes to an island and he is enforcing his Christian views onto things. That's not really so present in the remake, but that's what they have in the original. And
Here
he thinks
it's
everybody,
just those damn women.
It's like you have these women prancing around in circles who are naked and they're hopping over fire, and he's looking at it very I guess with some very mixed emotions. Like he's repressing these natural things of which is an interesting way of looking at it. And there's some great stuff with the original that I wasn't expecting. I will admit though, I did kind of fall asleep at some point, so I probably missed some things. Like at some point he ended up in a clown costume, not a bear suit, in the original. But
it's funny how that's somehow less ridiculous than the bear suit.
It is, and man, like the last 30 minutes of the original Wicker Man is really the moment. It's one of those films where the plot twist is the main hook of it. It's like
there was a good build up too, I'd imagine.
And it's weird. Like I remember seeing a reaction of somebody seeing The Sixth Sense and not knowing what the twist is. It's like The Sixth Sense. It's like Soylent Green, Wicker Man. It's like the twist is the main hook of the story, which
Fight
unfortunately,
Club.
No.
I wouldn't say that's the main hook.
No, I like you can still walk into Fight Club without knowing the twist. You just know Fight Club. You don't talk about Fight Club. Like,
oh, that's okay. All right.
But like you don't know what the themes are going into it, or at least I didn't. So it's one of those films where it's kind of hard to talk about it without spoiling it off the bat, because really, like I said, the twist is the hook. But
right,
it's really effective in that sense, and that's why it has this kind of staying power.
Steven, tell me something. Nicolas Cage's character is allergic to bees, right? And there's a scene where he comes across like a bunch of hot beehives with bees buzzing around. Why does he just stand right next to one for a solid 10 seconds? Why does he go around them?
Well, in fact, there's actually one scene where he runs through a field of beehives.
When he could just go around.
He could really go around, but for whatever reason,
because forced conflict. Because we need to add conflict to the story. We need bigger stakes, more action, more fighting. But all of that just takes away from the film so much.
So I do want to talk about, speaking about Nicolas Cage and bees. This film has 2 alternate cuts.
Really?
I don't know.
I can't say I'm surprised.
I don't know which was the director's, Mr. Labout's, intended vision, but the first cut of this film is the same exact movie, and Nicolas Cage burns alive in the Wicker Man at the end of the movie, and then it immediately flashes forward years later to a bar where these 2 women are picking up men to go back to the island, and it's implied that James Franco, who's just randomly in this bar as a hotshot cop, he's going to be the next victim. And I have no idea if that was to set up a sequel. I don't know.
I guarantee you that's what it is.
But yeah, it was.
But it's also like those damn women. Those women, man, they're out to get you. Be careful.
Right.
Should just date men instead.
alternate cut includes an extended torture sequence.
Of course it
Oh,
does.
boy.
They take Nicolas Cage, they break both of his legs and knees, and then they put a giant funnel over his head.
I mean, that's in the original. Oh,
No, that's the extended that became memed.
This is the extended cut.
I must
They
have.
put a giant
yeah.
funnel over his head, fill it with bees.
Yeah.
Oh no, the bees, not the bees. Right. And he has an allergic reaction, and he passes out.
They give
dead.
him an EpiPen.
No, that's the thing. They pull out an EpiPen, and they shoot it in his neck because they're not done with him yet, and then they burn him alive.
Why do they torture him? Why is that necessary part of the process? We don't know.
This was the thing. This was the thing that I was trying to understand. That I was struggling to understand. I can understand breaking his knees.
So he won't get
so
away. Yeah.
Sure, they wouldn't want him to, put up a fight. But first of all, why would you purposely give him an allergic reaction to, if you're going to burn him alive? Secondly, where do these people get an EpiPen? Where do they get
That's
an
a good
EpiPen?
question. They're
These people are
isolated.
millions
They're
and millions
isolated.
miles
Was it
away
his
from
EpiPen?
civilization.
When did they grab it? Why did
It
he have
doesn't
it on
seem
him?
in
How did he
line
not
with
lose
any
it
of
when
their
they?
stuff if they're
Yeah, these people who tried
pagans
to
and
kill
all
him. By
natural.
the way, we're gonna set a trap where he could potentially drown to death.
Well, okay, and here's another thing that bugged me, but no pun intended. So,
God.
oh God, this, yeah, I can't even remember. This film is so bad. God.
That's a good sign.
Oh, God.
Here, I'll mention some.
Okay, wait a minute. So he's established in the beginning as a police officer in the state of California.
Yes.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
He takes a boat to Washington State where there is this island that he
Wait,
thinks
didn't he take a plane?
No, he takes a boat.
Oh, he takes a
right?
boat and then takes a plane.
I don't know. Anyway, my point is, even if he's a police officer, even if he's acting on behalf of the law, which he's not, he literally has no right to be where he is. Who is he acting on behalf of? Because he's not in his state jurisdiction. What does he accomplish? What does he hope to accomplish here? He's gonna find the kid, and then what?
Well, get out, I guess, was the plan. Like, he was probably gonna...
Well, something that is really highlighted in the original that it's probably lost in the remake is he believes that the whole island is a conspire to murder, that she was killed or kidnapped, and the whole island is in on her being missing. And again, I don't know what jurisdiction. It's just like a moral thing, I suppose.
Well, no, but I'm saying if you're a police officer in the state of California, what are you doing trying to enforce the law in Washington? Like, he's not a federal agent. He's a local beat cop.
Well, isn't the fact that it is his own daughter that they give it that reason, or?
Yeah, but he doesn't even know that it's his own daughter until halfway through
and it's
the
also
film.
the daughter of an ex-wife that she didn't give back the ring of, and was apparently such a bitch to him. But he's like, no, I need to redeem myself. Like, an easy fix for that is he did something wrong in the relationship. Show a quick flashback where he fucked up the relationship, and he's like, I feel responsible, I feel guilty, I need to make up to this somehow, and this is my last chance to do so. Boom! Makes perfect sense. It gives, like, more of a reason to go find his daughter. But we don't get that.
Yeah, but they don't do that. They just...
Exactly. They're just like, go with it. Like, stupid things happen and just go with it. Like, that's the whole vibe of the fucking movie. Like, there's just so many points that don't make sense. Like, they tried to kill him several times before the thing happens. Why would they do that? Doesn't that fuck up your plan?
The thing that pissed me off, it's like, at the very end, he pulls out a gun and he's gonna shoot the cult goers. And so... the woman, his ex-wife, has this big dramatic reveal. where she has the bullets in her hand and she like unfurls her hand and all the bullets fall off.
Yeah.
Like they've taken
That
his
hasn't
gun
been done
while he
before.
wasn't looking.
Somehow.
But they don't show that he has a gun unless I'm remembering.
No, he has
wrong.
a gun. Like, he pulls out the gun on the kids, remember? Get off the bike. Step away from the bike. Take your stupid mask. Why do you have to hold my gunpoint? They're kids. Just push them or just tell them to get out of the way. Or it's like I have rights too. Yeah, you have the right to get the fuck out of my way.
Yeah, this film was a disaster.
Oh, man.
Wow.
So much about it doesn't make sense. I also like to point out the filmmaking is so bland. The editing is terrible, but the filmmaking is also so bland. Like, what could have made this film interesting, same way what about Midsummer, but it's at least interestingly shot. Like, there's some clever uses of lighting, there's great, like, mise-en-scene and details in the foreground. But here it's just so bland, and everything looks so cheap, and the lighting is always blasted, there's no interesting use of shadows. Like, looks so cheap.
Well, and they also just inject bee-themed imagery into every single scene.
For
to
no
the
reason.
point that he walks in at one point, and I get what they're trying to do, is they're trying to do that scene from The Shining, where, like, it's the guy in the bear costume. But he opens a door in this house, and there's just a naked woman who's covered in bees. But it has no emotional weight. It's not scary.
His reaction is also just, oh, that was inconvenient.
Yeah, it's not like, it's trying to be Kubrick, but like Kubrick, at least by the time that you get to the guy in the bear costume, there's been things that have indicated some idea of where you're going. This film is so directionless.
And it also injects all these like false jump scares where like he's in this classroom and he opens up a desk and a fucking crow flies out, I think.
It's so cheap. And the dream
and, like,
sequence.
Yeah, it's like all these jump scares are thrown injected into the plot, because the original film doesn't have that. It's not really a horror film until, or at least not a scary horror film until the last 30 minutes, where this tries to remind you, oh, by the way, this is a horror film. Here's a crow.
Yeah, here's a crow. Here's a creepy dream scene. Here's an image of a fetus in a jar that shows up out of nowhere and has no explanation of it, because fetuses in jars are creepy.
Can we please... Can we please just talk about Ellen Burstyn from The Exorcist was in this movie.
I know.
From Requiem for a Dream.
Nicolas Cage.
I know.
Nicolas Cage. I mean, I love the guy.
He's been in a lot of garbage.
Bad movies.
Ellen Burstyn, though.
Ellen
Burstyn. Man, as soon as I learned who she was, I was like, oh no. How the mighty have fallen.
From the scenes.
I know.
Emmy Award-winning, Tony Award-winning.
Should have won an Oscar for Requiem for a Dream actress.
Oh God.
Oh man.
This was Ellen bursting from the seams.
Yeah, wow.
And she looks like she couldn't care less in the entire movie. Every scene she was in, she was just like, she gave the vibes of, can we go home? Can we wrap this up already?
Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
God.
And you know what? I don't want to be here either until the last 30 minutes, which are amazing. And the line delivery, oh God, oh my God, is the shit cherry on the shit cake. I'm giving this pile of shit a 2.5 out of 10 for the laughs.
Wow.
I'll give it a I'll give it a 5 out of 10.
Wow, that's way more generous than I was expecting.
I think it's pretty generous, yeah, but I did laugh at it, and again, it's not Midsommar, so...
It's...
Yeah, exactly. So, as someone that just saw the original Wicker Man this ran and partially fell asleep through it, but still enjoyed it, I'm going to give that movie a 6.9 and give the remake, the inverse, a 3.4, because it just made it funnier unintentionally.
Very nice.
The memes are
Speaking
delicious.
Of memes, it is time
Val like to meme deliciously
for the grand and ultimate finale. The most horrifying film
we've talked about.
The most horrifying film in the selection. B movie. Spoiler alert
Yes.
for this masterpiece. The year is 2007. Home to such masterpieces like No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood, Ratatouille, Sunshine, and of course, B-movie. What can easily be described as the white man's Black Panther. Because what you all don't understand is that this is an important seminal film. A film about discrimination, about justice, and most importantly, it's a film about the love between an animal and a human being. Real love. Sometimes sexual love. It's a very empowering. It's a very empowering experience, disguised as a DreamWorks animation picture. And for that reason alone, it deserves its rightful place in the history books. Alright, enough about that shit. This movie is an agonizing, painful experience in every way, shape, or form. What's it about? Who gives a shit? It's B-movie. B wants to fuck a human, then tries to sue the human race for some reason, and gives back to them by the end of the movie for some reason. There's a joke about Diego Luna and Ray Liotta for some reason, and there's a shitty lawyer joke at the end of the film. That's it, everybody. That's B-movie. Before we get into kicking this film's ass, I just want to ask, Steven, how does it feel that this is your first animated film on the podcast?
Well, I wish that it wasn't this one. Boy, and I watched this film. I must have watched it as a kid because 2007, I would have been 12 years old. So I had to have seen this as a young 12-year-old. And watching this the other night, I realized, oh my God, I hope nothing really bad happened in my childhood because I have repressed so much. I watched this. This film is so ugly. The animation is terrible.
God, awful. Like, it's... Can we talk... Let's talk about that for a sec. This movie had a budget of $150 million. Shrek 2 came out 3 years before this and had the same budget. And it looks infinitely better than this movie. Like, Ratatouille came out the same year and had the same budget. Like, where did the money go? Because it clearly didn't go into the animation, and for reasons I'll discuss later, I highly doubt it went to the star-studded cast.
I don't think it's the animation itself that is the issue. Like, the way characters move and flow, like, I like to give animators credit where it's due. It's the fucking uncanny, just weird character designs, and it's just so bizarre. It's the character design. And
fucking Patrick Warburton's character with a squished-in face, and it's like weird mouth movements. Like, he looks like a nightmare. Fucking John Goodman's character looks like a somehow shittier version of the fat guy from Toy Story 2. Like, what happened here?
All of these characters are so ugly. The dialogue is terrible.
Oh my.
This has an awful plot.
It's stupid with a capital S. Like, it's the kind of stupid that gives you secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah, and the other thing is... the other thing I found funny is they reference famous people, but then those people don't voice themselves.
And they show up for no reason.
What was the deal with
Larry
Ray Liotta?
B. King.
Yeah, what was the... Yeah, no, I think that was Larry King. I could be mistaken.
It was Larry King.
That was Larry King. Most of the cast is Jerry Stein. So Jerry Seinfeld wrote and produced this movie. Huge shocker. So I guarantee you a lot of the cast members were just his friends that were blackmailed into the movie. I guarantee it. Because the lawyer was voiced by
John Goodman.
John Goodman, who's good friends with him. The judge was Whoopi Goldberg, or was it? Everybody gets mad at me for getting mixed.
About the movie. I mean,
yeah, it doesn't matter. Like Renee Zellweger, and like most of the cast were just friends they blackmailed into the movie. And if they paid more than $2 to have Jerry Seinfeld write and star in this movie, they got a rip-off. So I'm not convinced that's where the budget went either. Because usually I give they clearly just gave the money to star-studded cast. I'm like, what star-studded cast? Jerry Seinfeld hasn't been in anything around this time. Seinfeld was canceled long before this movie came out. What was he in? What was he doing? He was brewing a B-movie. That's what he was doing. What a great use of your time.
Yeah. I mean, and it's honestly, it's kind of forgettable. It's so bad.
It's so boring.
It's like when Woody Allen did Ants. You know, like what was he
Ooh.
doing up to this point that he decided to do an animated movie? It's like Jerry Seinfeld's just a little eye touch. Let's do an animated. Let's do what Woody Allen did with Ants. Make a B movie.
This movie
Woody
is
Allen,
so painfully unfunny. I chuckled 2
Yeah.
times throughout the entire film. One of those times, both of those times were for Patrick Warburton's character, because there was one part where Renee Zellweger is like, "He's the nicest bee I've been with for a long time." He's like, "Long time? Do you know that many are bees?" And I was like, okay, that was kind of funny, but it also made me think, wait, so is this film a self-aware shitpost? Because it also tries to be this pro-environmentalist film about like the mistreatment
yeah.
of bees and the environment.
Like I think it was trying to educate people on like bees' role in the ecosystem and how everything would fall apart without them, which is great. I mean, that's good to understand if you're a young age that you don't want to be a murderer of bees.
Hey.
But
Hey.
the whole film is
and
this
another thing
this
I
fever
mean,
dream
even
that puts
I'm
you in a
not a
state of
lawyer, but
delirium.
the legal sequences in this film were so inaccurate. Like I got
Oh yeah.
It's an
secondhand
animated
embarrassment
movie.
for all
I
of
I've
the
get
seen
it,
enough
but
Better Call Saul to know that this isn't our trial. This is a mistrial.
yeah, I know. And John Goodman is a
Why are
very
they
talented
trying
voice actor.
Okay, so hold on.
Sorry.
I need to talk about the legal aspects of this film because this is a courtroom drama.
Oh God.
Let's talk about this, okay? So they start out. They're going to sue the human race for illegally harvesting money or illegally harvesting honey from bees
Against the bees will.
And so his lawyer is going to be his friend, who is a florist who is not a lawyer. Number one, that's terrible. Number two, she's aiding him to sue humankind. Is she not suing herself? Is there not like first of all, how do you define humankind?
Yeah, they
Secondly,
very clearly
is there
just
not,
sue
like,
a
a
corporation. They don't even sue the human race.
Is there not
I
is
felt
there
like
treason for being a human and suing humanity?
I feel like there was a
Wait a
mispotential.
minute. They put this court in New York after they've abandoned the humanity angle. They just arbitrarily switch in the middle to say that he's suing 5 major food corporations, which, if this was a trial against humanity, why is it taking place in New York? Shouldn't this be at the United Nations? Secondly, if they're suing 5 major food corporations, you're telling me that only 5 major food corporations have the monopoly on all honey in the world? Okay, again, now we're going to talk about that this is happening in New York, and there is not a mistrial declared when one of the defendants, or the plaintiff rather, brings in a live bear into the courtroom.
Oh yeah, the bear, which is just straight up reused asset from Over the Hedge. Like, it is the exact same bear from Over the Hedge. They did no changes on it.
That's a model and rig.
Yeah.
This film is horrendous. I'm done talking about it.
I have to give credit to the meme community for making this film seem way more interesting than it actually is. Because a lot of
it's keeping it culturally relevant long after its expiration date. I mean, they say honey never expires.
The day it came out.
I think this film is an artificial sweetener with an aftertaste, but I guess some people like that, and that's been very evident in the meme community. Keeping this film culturally relevant long past its due.
Oh man, I don't get it. Like, why B movie? Why this movie? It's so boring and dull and dated. It's so weird. I'll give them that. But there's plenty of other weird animated movies that would be better meme material. Do a Wallace and Gromit movie for memes.
The existence of it is just an anomaly you have to behold. And
I know.
I'm done.
No, come on. But there's a lot to talk about this, Steven.
No,
you want to talk about the bestiality
Steven,
plot?
we got 40 minutes left.
Hey, come on. We got
15 minutes
20 minutes left.
I can't tell time anymore.
Hey,
unlike bees,
we're keep it going.
Time, no matter.
None of it makes sense.
Hey, Steven. Why don't we talk about the bestiality plot?
The bestiality. Oh my god.
Yeah, they just casually start dating like a human being between a bee?
Patrick Warburton's character is exactly right. You left me for a bee?
Yeah,
and everyone treats him like he's crazy, but he is the
Why do
only
they treat him
person that
like
makes
shit?
any sense.
Like the scene when he's coming home, they treat him like shit for no reason. They're just really mean to him for no reason. And then when he's gone, they're like, "Oh, good riddance." It's like, wait a minute. So you set us up to make us feel bad for Patrick Warburton's character, and then we're supposed to feel relieved that he's gone? Like, what do you want me to feel from this scene, movie? I don't understand what you're going for at all. It's just like, I'm convinced they didn't give Patrick Warburton lines. They just said react to the plot of this movie, because that sums up his character perfectly. The other time I chuckled when she was like, "Oh, he's suing the human race." They just gives a face where it's like, what? And I chuckled because I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel about this bullshit.
Yeah, it is. Wow. And why does the lawyer, why does he bring up that the bee might be on steroids?
Why do they bring up that other people illegally use the term
Because
bees?
it's a
like
topical problem in the legal system.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with their case? They were suing the human race.
It's a complete straw man argument.
Is that the joke? Like, is that the joke? But it's not funny. Yeah, it's not funny.
It's a Wicker Man argument. It's due to
they talk like characters in Wicker Man, straight up.
This entire movie is a shitpost.
And the bee, yeah, but it also tries to be like. There's parts where it feels like it's trying to be. There's parts where it's trying to be like a self-aware shitpost, but it's also like trying to be this really serious movie about the environment, and it's exactly how I felt about Showgirls, but at least that was more fun. When this movie was just agonizing.
There is one shot that I will give credit to that is the one genuine laugh in the entire film for me that I thought was actually subtly kind of brilliant. It's when they're talking about, how is our society too perfect? And they're literally standing in the middle of traffic while everybody is moving around them, and they don't have a second thought about it. Like, that was the one shot in the whole thing. Like, wow, that was actually nice, subtle visual humor, which I remember finding funny as a kid, and I still found that was the one laugh I had in the whole thing. Yeah, that wasn't ironic.
Also, they established that bees die when they sting someone,
and then they don't.
And then they don't. Then he doesn't die.
There's no consequence.
He had him on an IV of honey.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting.
And then he's just in court the next day, like going to the hospital didn't matter. There was no consequences. Why even have him attack someone? They had no consequences to the story. Like, it's not that hard to write a compelling kids story. Again, Ratatouille came out the same fucking year and has infinitely better story-wise and animation-wise. And I'm not just doing that to suck Disney off, because I hate them.
I'm gonna go ahead and...
No, we're not done. We're not done, because I also need to talk about the humor. Okay, you can do it, Steven.
Stop it. As long as possible,
yeah, we can't drag it out, Steven. You can do this. I suffered through this for you. We can make this audience suffer with us.
We haven't even lit the Wicker Man on fire yet.
Oh my god, this film is terrible. It
is.
The animation is ugly. I mean, wow. I mean, I kind of understand that this is such a surreal fever dream experience that it kind of lends itself to the meme culture because of just how absurd it is. I can't believe that this was made.
And they put so much money behind it. $150 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is
especially
a lot of
back then. And here's the thing, the consistency of the humor is so all over the place too, because we have like the most childish juvenile humor, and that's balanced with weirdly dark jokes about race and dying and genocide
and references that only adults would appreciate or get.
Like, who is this movie for? Yeah, no kid knows what Sting is.
Kids don't know who Sting is. They don't know who Ray Liotta is. And it's funny to me. It's funny to me that they couldn't.
Suicide Pact.
Why is there a joke about mass genocide? Like, there's the scene where there's like, nope, he's dead, and that's life.
Why do they make a joke about the fact that Larry King is Jewish? And it's not even Larry King, it's B. Larry King.
Also, it's like,
and this is the other thing. This was the thing. Is like his mother says, I hope she's at least B-ish earlier. and that was like the joke. But then they talked about Larry King being Jewish, and I'm like, so wait a minute, is it B's or Jewish in this world? Like,
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah.
almost like they let the actors improvise, and the actors aren't that funny when they improvise. It's almost like Jerry Seinfeld isn't that funny. Like, I'm sorry, but this movie is confirmation that
What's the
Jerry
deal
Seinfeld
with bees?
is a hack.
what's
Like,
the
he
deal
got
with airline food?
he got lucky with Seinfeld. Like, the supporting cast carried a lot of that show. Let's be honest.
I think Larry David was a lot of the.
Yeah, Julia
a
Louis
lot of.
Dreyfus carried a lot of it too.
I mean Kramer before he went super racist, but
The
Jason
cat-
Alexander as well.
And I think this movie just kind of proves that. It's like without that powerful supporting cast, he's just got nothing. Not even John Goodman and Patrick Warburton could make this movie work. And the whole time I'm like, who is this movie for? Because it's too stupid for adults, but there's so many adult references and references to racism and jokes about lawyers that kids aren't going to understand. So
But
who is this movie
here's
for?
the thing that may be quietly genius about it. By having those jokes that kids don't understand, that we as adults can appreciate later, just for being how absurd and out of place it is. But it's there. I don't know.
Well, it's trying to be like Shrek is what it is. It's like, oh, Shrek did this, make adult jokes that kids wouldn't really understand until they get older, but that had a purpose. That had a consistency to it, because Shrek is kind of like this edgy take on fairy tales in the first place. So having like jokes that only adults can understand, like, do you think he's compensating for something? Like it fits. Like it fits the narrative and the tone it's going for. But here it's like it's so scattershot. It's like I love sick dark humor as much as the next guy, but there needs to be a consistency to it. Otherwise, you're just putting a hat on top of a hat.
I'm gonna give this a half star out of 10.
This
film is atrocious.
I will give it.
You are more than done with this, aren't you?
I'm so done. I do have to get going. This movie is terrible.
right.
I can't even describe how terrible it is. Good night, everybody, and stay tuned for something better than B movie. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us, Steven.
Yeah, thanks, Steven.
Thank you.
We'll announce what our films are next week later.
Actually,
we'll
Steven
I
knows.
believe we're doing spicy curry.
Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Right.
Excellent.
Talk to you all later. Good night, everybody.
We'll make sure to mention that later on. I'm with Steve on this
I
one.
don't know about you. I like a little honey in my curry.
Yep. This movie was a painful, agonizing experience. It's just the only parts I enjoyed was just wondering how it got made. But besides a couple chuckles, it was a painful experience. I never want to see it again. Not even ironically. 1.5 out of 10.
Wow. I think I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I mean, I was just half watching it, and it was just kind of in the state of delirium. I won't probably rewatch it again, but it just put me in the state of delirium that I'm currently enjoying. It's like the way the one character described, where it was like adrenaline and then euphoria. But then I'm probably gonna just feel drained and empty inside unless I get a little honey in me. I don't know.
What would you
that's
give
kind
it
of the
out of 10?
experience of watching this film. I almost want to give it a 6.9 just for the memes are a 6.9. The movie doesn't warrant any of those.
It really doesn't.
Just some takeaway scenes. There's some weird. It's just so fucking bizarre. It's such a product of its time and the culture, which we just were barely understanding. I felt like even when it came out, was just slightly too old for it. Like I would have been 12 years old, and I felt like I should probably be moving on from these kind of movies. Like it was just like at that end point of the absurdity. Like Shrek and Shrek 2 were it. Like I was fully in those when those came out. By the time movie came out, I'm like, okay, I should probably grow up and watch more adult
thing with
things.
Shrek is that they've held up so well for adults anyways, and that's why
and
so many people love them.
And that's the other thing too, is like the humor is mature and clever, and
actually
I
funny.
don't know how to describe
the
this.
actors are talented. It does have an awful voice from Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh God,
he's so bad. Like anytime he tries to be serious and he has this whiny, nasally voice, it just kept pulling me out of the experience. What's your final score?
This is I don't know how to even quantize it.
3.4. Do it.
I don't even know if that's.
I'll give it the same score as us then.
What's the numerical equivalent to B? 2?
2. Give it a 2. Well, technically it would be an 8, but please, for love of God, don't give this film a fucking 8 out of 10.
Christ.
All right.
I'll give it a 3.4. It's the inverse of 6.9.
Hey, there you go. Well, thank you guys so much for listening in. Tune in next week for our third Halloween episode. It's our final Halloween episode because after that it will be November. So next week's episode we are talking about some spicy curry films, which include the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Legend, which I actually haven't seen, and the 1990 version, 1990, I think it's just 1990, TV movie version of It starring Mr. Curry. So look forward to that next week, guys, and is it Tuesday yet? Have a great night, guys. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in.